Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the hidden financial engine of the entire world. Think about this for a second. In 2025 alone, the world bought around $3 trillion worth of oil, and almost all of it was paid for in a single currency. Why? Well, it's not just because that currency happened to be the strongest. It's actually because of a massive shift in global finance that culminated in a secret deal made right in the middle of a Saudi Arabian desert back in 1974. We're going to visually unpack the history, the mechanics, and the honestly fascinating future of the petrodollar system. We've got a lot of ground to cover, from the days right after World War II to modern geopolitics, so let's get right into it. Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to start with the closing of the gold window, move into the 1973 oil shock, break down that pivotal 1974 Saudi deal, analyze the recycling loop, and finally, look at the future of the dollar. Section 1. Closing the gold window and the end of Bretton Woods. So for decades after World War II, the US dollar was confidently anchored by physical gold. But as America started printing way too many dollars to spend heavily on wars and social programs, the math just broke down. Countries realized this and started demanding their actual gold back. This forced a massive hand. On August 15, 1971, President Richard Nixon walked onto national television and delivered this bombshell.
I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold.
Boom. With that single sentence, the gold window was slammed shut. The US dollar was suddenly backed by absolutely nothing but trust. And let's be real, at that specific moment in history, trust wasn't exactly in high supply. Let's move to and see how this builds, because this existential crisis escalated rapidly. In 71, the dollar gets decoupled from gold. The currency is floating and inflation is looming large. But history didn't give the US any time to catch its breath. Just 2 years later, in 1973, the Yom Kippur War triggers a massive oil embargo. And it's this pressure cooker that directly forced the creation of the 1974 Saudi deal. Let's zoom in on that middle domino. Section 2. The 1973 oil shock and the weaponization of oil. During the 1973 Yom Kippur War between Egypt, Syria, and Israel, the United States backed Israel with a massive airlift of weapons. In response, Arab oil producers, OPEC, decided to hit America right where it hurt: $12 a barrel. Now, I know, $12 sounds incredibly cheap to us today, but this was a massive, absolutely explosive jump from just $3 a barrel. OPEC slashed production and completely embargoed the United States. Gas stations literally ran dry across America. Sorry, no gas today just became standard operating procedure, and lines of cars were stretching for blocks. It was chaos. So let's summarize the triad of problems the United States was facing here. First, the dollar had lost its gold anchor. Second, it was facing massive, ugly inflation. And third, the world's most vital commodity, oil, was successfully being used as an economic weapon against them. This was a full-blown code red crisis. America desperately needed a new anchor for the dollar. They needed something so universally essential that every country in the world would be virtually forced to hold and use US dollars, regardless of whether it was backed by shiny metal or not. Which brings us perfectly to Section 3, the 1974 Saudi deal, and the birth of a new anchor for the dollar. Enter U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, who travels to the desert with an ingenious, mutually beneficial proposal. Saudi Arabia had the largest pool of oil on Earth, right? That made them incredibly wealthy, but also highly vulnerable in a very volatile region. And this brilliantly illustrates the two sides of the historic agreement they struck. Saudi Arabia agreed to two massive things. First, price and sell all of their oil exclusively in U.S. dollars. Second, invest all those extra dollars into U.S. Treasury bonds. In exchange, the United States agreed to sell them advanced weapons, heavily protect their oil fields, and provide a comprehensive military security umbrella. Basically, if anyone wanted to mess with Saudi Arabia, they had to go through the U.S. military first. Within a year, the rest of OPEC followed suit. The petrodollar was officially born. Section 4. The petrodollar recycling loop and how this machine actually operates. Now, the true genius of this system wasn't just pricing the oil in dollars. It was what happened to those dollars afterward. Let's walk through the loop. Step 1. Because global oil is exclusively priced in dollars, if a country like Japan or Germany wants energy, they must acquire US dollars first. That creates a constant, massive global demand for the currency. Step 2. Oil exporters like Saudi Arabia suddenly get mountains of dollars, so they recycle them, literally pushing them back into the US system by buying US Treasury bonds and investing in American markets. Step 3. America then uses those recycled funds to finance its own government debt and, crucially, to fund the very military protecting the oil fields. It's a continuous, self-sustaining loop. America doesn't even need to sell the oil. It just needs to ensure the world keeps using dollars to buy it. By the 1980s, this recycling loop made American financial markets the undisputed center of global capital. It created what economists call exorbitant privilege. Because the entire world is literally forced to hold dollars just to keep their lights on and buy energy, the US can borrow money incredibly cheaply, run massive government deficits, and essentially print money while pushing the resulting inflation out onto the rest of the world. It is a staggering economic advantage. So, the crucial point is that the dollar isn't just money anymore. It is the primary infrastructure for global trade. It's basically the financial internet. Debt payments, banking reserves, trade settlements, so much of it runs exclusively through this dollar system. And because of that, the United States holds the ultimate superpower: sanctions. Getting cut off from the dollar means losing access to the global financial grid. It can make an entire country's economy simply stop working. And what happens when countries try to bypass this grid? Well, our source material highlights a rather uncomfortable historical correlation. In 2000, Iraq's Saddam Hussein proposed selling oil in euros. By 2003, following a U.S. invasion, Iraqi oil returned to dollars. In 2011, Libya's Gaddafi proposed a gold-backed currency for African oil trade. Soon after, NATO intervened and the plan died with him. In 2018, Venezuela launched a crypto project to dodge sanctions, and the source notes an escalating conflict leading up to a documented 2026 U.S. military operation. Now, to be completely objective here, the motives for these conflicts are highly, highly complex, involving weapons, regional politics, human rights, the whole shebang. But economists frequently point out this recurring pattern. Challenging the dollar often correlates with severe geopolitical consequences. Section 5. The future of the dollar, challengers and changing tides. While the petrodollar empire held strong for half a century, a massive fundamental shift began quite recently. The catalyst? In 2022, the U.S. froze nearly $300 billion of Russia's foreign reserves. Overnight, decades of Russian savings became completely unreachable. While it punished Russia, it also terrified other nations. Suddenly, countries realized their dollar reserves were only theirs as long as the U.S. agreed. The reaction was swift. China aggressively dumped U.S. treasuries, dropping from $1.3 trillion down to roughly $600 billion. Russia and China began trading in their own currencies, India started buying Russian oil in rupees, and, shockingly, Saudi Arabia, the very architect of that 1974 deal, publicly stated it was open to non-dollar trade. De-dollarization had officially been sparked. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that despite all these massive geopolitical shifts and flashy headlines, we need a quick reality check. The US dollar still completely dominates. It represents 88% of all foreign exchange transactions. The petrodollar machine is absolutely still running. No single rival, not the yuan, the euro, gold, or crypto, is currently anywhere close to outright replacing it. However, while the dollar doesn't face one giant rival, it is facing 1,000 small cuts. Its share of global reserves has steadily fallen from 72% in 2001 to under 58% today. Central banks are hoarding gold at record levels, adding over 1,000 tons in 2024 alone. The Chinese yuan is slowly creeping up. But honestly, perhaps the biggest existential threat of all has nothing to do with currency at all. 1 in 4 cars sold globally in 2025 is electric. The world is literally transitioning away from oil. Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought to wrap up today's explainer. If the very foundation of the US dollar's dominance is a global reliance on buying oil, what happens to the world's most powerful financial system if the world simply stops needing the commodity that backs it? As electric vehicles rise and new global alliances form, the petrodollar recycling loop is facing its greatest test yet. It's a fascinating shift in global architecture and something we should all be paying very close attention to. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking questions, and I'll catch you next time.